today we are going to go on with our request on the Lambda, Rust, and so on, and we are going to try to solve a problem. The problem is I want to gather an email through a form. In exchange of this email, I will send you the first chapter of one of Luciano's book, sorry, and or any kind of payload. To be honest, any kind of PDF can be sent in exchange of this email. So it's the usual exchange of information for information. There are various services that do that this online, but often they offer a lot of other stuff, and they are quite expensive. So our aim, starting today, is to replace this with some simple something on AWS. It can be Lambdas, CloudFront, API Gateway. We'll see while we go through. So, Luciano, do you want to explain a little bit better what we are going to do?
I will try, and caveat, we have some ideas, but we haven't implemented this yet, so I'm sure we will figure out lots of stuff as we go. So let me share my screen, which you are not seeing.
No,
now you should be seeing. Okay, so this is the website for my book, so sorry for the advertisement. Actually, I'm going to do it well, and I'm just going to post it in the chat as well. So
more advertisement. Yay.
More advertisement. So the idea is that this is kind of a sales page where advertises whatever are the benefits of the book. But of course, there is at some point a call to action, which is, if you're still not convinced, leave me your email address, and then you can download a free chapter. So you get a PDF on your email. Now, as Roberto said, for this particular website, only for this feature, we are using a SaaS product, one of those like marketing lead generation products, which are not necessarily too expensive because we are on the lowest plan, but they're still expensive enough for this feature. I think it's something around $90 a month, which for this feature feels very unnecessary, right? For this feature alone. If I was using all the other features, probably it would be worth it. So our idea is to try to rebuild this particular flow. So some kind of hosted form that you can easily embed on a website. That form needs to be connected with a backend of some sort, receives an email, maybe with some kind of campaign ID attached to it. Through that campaign ID, you know which campaign you are dealing with. You can check out, register the user email, send back the attachment that is expected to be sent for that campaign ID. And then maybe we can also have a mechanism that if we want to store all the emails, because maybe you want to reach out in the future to say, I don't know, I have a new book or whatever, you can also keep track of all the emails registered for a specific campaign.
Obviously, all of the emails will register to your newsletter.
Maybe also that, yes. Maybe you can opt in to also that.
Or maybe you can opt out.
Or opt out later after you receive the first one.
Yeah,
if you don't know what we are talking about, let me do another piece of advertisement. This is the newsletter that Roberto is talking about. And it's a newsletter for full stack developers. So every week you get links and content that can be relevant if you are a full stack developer or you want to become one. Just to show you an example, one just came out today and it looks like this. You have some quotes, articles, a book, more articles. So hopefully something that could be interesting for you if you want to check it out. Okay, so we have a little bit of an architecture diagram. It's a little bit messy, to be honest. So we'll try to describe the flow as we are thinking about it right now. So there is a user. So the interaction starts with the user. The user input their email address on the form. So there is some kind of website where we have an iframe, and that iframe is hosting the form. So somehow we'll need to be able to provide the URL for that iframe as part of our solution. So in that form, you have a field saying input the email. So this is open to the user, and then an hidden field, which is the campaign ID, which is something that somehow we are gonna either hard code in a database for now, but you can imagine if this was a SaaS product, the user creating the campaign will have to log in somewhere, create the campaign from a UI, and then somehow download the snippet of code to embed on the website. We are going to take many shortcuts because we are not building a SaaS for this, at least not yet. But I think it's useful to think in terms of if we were building a SaaS, what else would we need to do? Okay, so the next step is, this is the form, the user loads it, inputs the email, clicks submit. What happens next is that this form needs to be handled somewhere. And for instance, this could be Lambda, for instance, through API gateway. So the post of the form ends up in API gateway triggers a Lambda. And at that point, lots of stuff needs to happen in this Lambda. For instance, we need to validate the campaign ID. We need to validate if the email looks correct. We need to create a subscription record somewhere, possibly a DynamoDB table. Then we need to start to be ready to send the email. And this is something probably we want to do it asynchronously. So we might put that send confirmation email in a job queue. And we can also make the whole flow extensible. So for every step, we might generate event bridge events. So in the future, if we want to hook into specific steps of this flow, we can easily listen to the event and do extra things. Maybe, I don't know, post a message in a Slack chat saying, you have a new subscriber or something like that. And then finally, we return a 200 to the user. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, the next step is that we put a job into an SQS queue. This SQS queue has effectively only two values, the subscription ID and the email of the user. So here we probably also want to have the email, right? And here as well. Or maybe the subscription ID already contains. Actually, let me show you here.
The subscription is written in Dynamo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might have a specific ID for that subscription. So we just store this one.
If you store the email in the subscription that is there, from a cost reduction point of view, reading and writing to Dynamo costs you money. Mm-hmm. So yes, you could put in the queue only the ID, but then you have to do a lookup in the Lambda to the DynamoDB table. And if you put the object in the queue before writing, or when you write, or if there is a concurrent, some kind of eventual consistent behavior that you try to read the ID from Dynamo before it's written, could happen in case of high traffic. It's probably better to keep the email in the queue itself. So you write it in Dynamo, but also you pass it in the queue, message in the queue. Because at that point, the sender of the email doesn't need to read Dynamo at all.
You might still want to validate it, but that's a good point, something to keep in mind.
Well, the email is already validated in the subscribe Lambda you wrote.
No, I mean, you might want to validate the subscription ID that it really exists, but to be fair, yeah, you probably don't get any value from doing that.
Because you think that somebody could put in your SQS queue a message
exactly,
and get
no, they can't.
Ow.
Unless you leave your credentials in the open.
Yeah, but okay, well.
Okay. The other thing that we might want to store, and again, this is more thinking that maybe you create a SaaS with some kind of analytics on top of it. I don't think we need it for our MVP, but you can imagine that when you create the subscription entry, you might have the IP of the user. So you might do some like geolocation to know where they're coming from. You might have a fingerprint. Maybe you want to track the user through a funnel. Maybe they came back to your website a couple of times before they started downloading the book. You could track all these kind of things. And then the usual timestamps, like the time that the email was sent, open, confirm, unsubscribed, all that kind of stuff. So with this table, theoretically, we should be able to manage the entire list associated to a campaign. So all the people subscribing, and maybe eventually they want to unsubscribe. Did they open the email? Did they confirm their email? And so on.
Once upon a time, you were doing the open data with a pixel in the image. Is that still the case? Or is...
I also have that in somewhere in this diagram. But I don't know if it's still, if there is a better way these days. Because
I think it was the very old way of doing so.
I think most of
and also you need a Lambda in the API gateway. You should need a Lambda to get that call and update the DynamoDB table. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. And I'm not sure how many email clients these days will load the image without making you explicitly confirm. Okay, so the next step is there is this queue, and you might have a Lambda consuming from this queue. Every time it receives, practically speaking, we receive batches of jobs. But for every job, basically what you need to do, validate the subscription ID. And again, here we said maybe we don't necessarily need to do that. Maybe we just deal with the email.
Trust the message, yeah.
Then there might be an email template, for instance, in S3. We need to send an email using SCS or some other email service like Mailgun, for instance. which are a little bit simpler than SES probably. Then we need to update the subscription record saying that the confirmation email was sent. And again, we might create an event bridge event just for extensibility.
Oh yeah, simple email service is quite annoying
Mm-hmm.
when you have to create the sender emails.
Plus,
At least with Terraform is annoying.
we have Thomas in the chat. Hello, Thomas. How are you? Yeah, and also I don't know how recent this is, but now you need to explicitly request AWS to have your account activated to send production emails. Otherwise, you can only send emails to yourself, something like that.
Oh God.
So you generally they just enable it, but you need to go through the process of creating a ticket that says,
So they
this is my
don't
use
want you
case.
to use it.
Pretty much. Yeah, I guess it's to protect from spammers, but it's an extra effort that you need to go through.
At this point, I pay SendGrid and fine.
Which is probably going to be simpler to use, either SendGrid or Mailgun or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so the next step is we have sent an email to the user. So we follow this tangent here. We go back to the user. The user sees a nice email that says something like, click here to confirm and get your reward. There is a tracking pixel, maybe. This is where I mentioned that there might be some tracking logic. So when the user clicks, what happens? Well, there is the open thing for tracking, but let's just say that they click on confirm subscription. So we keep going. Sorry, this diagram is pretty big. And we end up in this confirm subscription Lambda. What we need to do, confirm everything, create a pre-signed URL for the specific file for that campaign, send another email to the user saying, thank you, this is your file, click here to download it.
I was expecting you to send the pre-signed URL in the first email. No, you want them to confirm the email.
Yes, which might be an optional step, but I've seen the tool that I use today does that. And in a way, it's quite useful because it prevents people from putting random emails. So you get somewhat legitimate emails.
But well, it's not preventing people from putting random emails, because they will put random emails. And if the email is not working, you will just add the row to DynamoDB anyway.
Mm-hmm. But you're not
Just
sending the reward to random emails.
Like yes, you're creating less pre-signed URLs.
Mm-hmm. You could delete, for instance, every once in a while, all the emails that are not confirmed, something like that. So you keep your list clean and you know that in the list you have.
Yes, true. If you use that also for the newsletter, is useful. You're right. TTS, okay. Dynamo can do TTS, but can they do TTS based on? But well, you can do two Dynamo tables, one with a TTL of 1 week, and when it's confirmed, you write in another Dynamo table without a TTL. So the Dynamo table with the not confirmed email is auto pruning.
Mm-hmm.
Because scanning through a DynamoDB table costs a lot of money.
Exactly. So you should avoid scans at all costs. So that could be a way of doing it.
Tommaso is asking if the pre-signed URL have an expiration date. Yes, I was remembering that the top was 1 week. Luciano remembers more, but my data are from 2016, so it can be right. But at least it's 1 week.
Check. And it's
at least it's 1 week.
You define when you create the pre-signed URL, you set the expiry. So you could make it even 1 minute if you wanted to. But in this particular use case, considering people are receiving it by email, you probably should give them at least 1 day to open the email and download it. So the other thing, which is very interesting, and probably that's going to require a little bit of magic and workaround, is that the expiry is not just tied to the timestamp, but it's also tied to the credentials, the AWS IAM credentials that are used to generate the pre-signed URL. Now, if we're going to do this on Lambda, Lambda has very dynamic credential system. So for every Lambda instance, there are temporary credentials that get generated on the flight, and they last as much as that Lambda lasts. And a Lambda can go away in the span of a few minutes. So if you just created a pre-signed URL and then that Lambda goes away, that pre-signed URL automatically expires in a few minutes, even though the timestamp maybe says that that pre-signed URL needs to be valid for like 7 days. So this can be a problem, and there might be ways to work around it. For instance, we can create credentials that are long living credentials and use them only to create pre-signed URLs. And there are some tricks where even in the context of a Lambda, you can create a client with other credentials.
So where we start from the static form in the iframe, or no, there is still the other endpoint. Sorry.
There is the unsubscribe, and there is also the email open thing for tracking. So we can probably start by trying to list all of the resources that we want to build and start to work on the SAM template for some of these resources.
Okay, we start listing out the resources. We use SAM to create all our infrastructure. Okay.
That's
So we need
one way of doing it, I guess.
DynamoDB table, S3 buckets, Lambdas, API gateway, and we start with
Let's
how do we
start
serve the
with
form? With a Lambda, with a static file in S3, with CloudFront. What?
Let's do it with a Lambda first. Then if we need to do it differently, we'll figure it out. Okay, I already started a little SAM project with one Rust Lambda, which probably is not going to work really well. We can refactor, but we already have a template with some code. So let's see, what can we do? Okay, for now, let's keep this hello world Lambda function there. Let's start to create the bucket. Let's call it resources bucket, and we say type AWS S3 bucket. I don't know why there are two. And
with SAM, you can create any kind of AWS resource, or do you have limitations?
You can create any kind of AWS resource that is supported by CloudFormation.
Because it's using CloudFormation under the hood.
Yes, actually, if you are curious, it is effectively CloudFormation. The magic is that they have this transform, which, if you don't know transform, is basically CloudFormation macros. So there is effectively a function that is identified by this ID that every time you deploy this stack, figures out, okay, you need to run this macro. So it takes the entire stack as an input, run the function. The function can change the stack itself, and then whatever is the result of that function is deployed.
So they are YAML macros that change YAML. What can go wrong?
No, this is not a YAML macro. It's actually code written in some language, but takes YAML and produces new YAML. So it can be messy. I've written macros myself, and it gets messy really quickly. But the idea is that there is shortcut syntax. For instance, these events here, right, is not really CloudFormation pure syntax. It's just a shortcut. And it's very convenient shortcut, so they will convert to the equivalent CloudFormation, which is a little bit more verbose. Or the other thing, a Lambda, by default, you don't have to specify a policy, for instance, to write to the logs. They will create one for you by expanding this code and also adding the policy. So if we were writing this in raw CloudFormation, it would be much more painful than it is now with pure YAML.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So bucket, what do we call it? Should we create some parameters?
Yeah, because we need the name of the bucket later for the Lambda.
Yeah, no, I was thinking if we want to have some kind of application identifier or something like that, right? And we say...
No, I was thinking that, like in Terraform, you want to have a name as a parameter, so you can then pass the parameter also as a parameter to the Lambda, so you don't have to encode the bucket name in the Lambda.
But with some, we can reference that into an environment variable from their generated resource.
Okay.
So to be fair, we can even leave the name empty, and some will generate a random one for us. It's just to have something
that random
is
name,
somewhat meaningful.
Let's say campaign payloads, what they are. GIFs, campaign GIFs. Don't know.
Yeah, so let's say that we have an app ID, description, a unique name for this deployment. And basically here what we can say is sub and something like, I don't know, Tinykit, that's the name we chose. Then we can put here app ID, and then we can put something like rewards, something like that. So hopefully this is going to be descriptive enough.
Tommaso in the chat is saying that it's too complicated for him. If it's too complicated for you, I go home. Sorry, I'm already home.
Is this referred to this previous comment? This is the way to create a consultancy industry, to make it too complicated? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, sorry. I missed the previous comment.
Yeah,
sorry,
okay.
Sorry.
I don't necessarily disagree. Of course, I am biased because I work for a company that does AWS consulting for the most part. So totally biased here. But the thing that I like about AWS is that it can be complex and there is always a lot of stuff going on, but it's like Lego blocks. So you can really build anything once you understand the main building blocks. And when I tried other cloud providers, it seems to be that it works really well if you have a very specific use case that they thought about upfront. But then as soon as you drift away from that use case, you need to do crazy hacks to make things work, and you cannot really implement an easy solution because you're almost like working around the system. While with AWS, there is more upfront complexity, but then you have more freedom. So I guess pros and cons. It's not necessarily the best solution for everything, but there are advantages. Anybody in the chat, feel free to disagree with me if you think otherwise.
If you think that Google Cloud Provider is good. No, well.
Is it bucket or bucket name? Bucket name. Wait, bucket name. And then, why doesn't like it? Okay. Yeah, there is also the encryption thing that I can never remember. So there is
you want it encrypted with the default AWS key, right?
Exactly. Which encryption policy or something?
I never did the cloud formation, so I can't help you.
Okay, let me Google it for myself.
Yeah. Because also, I don't remember the Terraform once either. I mean, you have to read the documentation to write it, or use 1000 copy and paste from all my snippets. Yeah, Tommaso is saying that Google Cloud Provider, he experienced the troubles. Everybody experienced troubles with GCP.
And I can probably say the same for Azure, but I mean also for AWS. But again,
I think Azure is less than Google in my experience.
Okay.
Azure does the stuff in his own way. Cool. But at least they don't change every 10 seconds everything. They have a little bit more mature approach to software. More old style, if you want, because they built Azure for legacy customers that wanted to move to the cloud, basically. So the approach is different.
Okay, so I found, I think, the property. That should be it. No, doesn't like it. Oh, it's another property. It's like 3 levels deep.
Yeah, it was not enough having bucket encryption, server-side encryption by default.
Okay, now it's happy.
And you were saying that with that transform we write less boilerplate, correct?
Yes, there might be some shortcut here, but I'm not aware.
Okay, let's go. Okay, we have our bucket. Do we need in any way to tell that the Lambda can access the bucket, or?
The other few things that we can add are these ones that are also best practices, which is basically, this is the general issue that you hear in the news every once in a while, that somebody in the financial industry made a bucket public by mistake, or because maybe they wanted to do something without realizing the consequences, and that leaked a massive amount of sensible information. So these are also good properties to use. To be fair, I think that recently AWS said that if you create a new bucket by default, you get, if not all of this, most of these are enabled by default. But just in case, it's good practice to have them. Okay, so what do we do next?
Next, what was there? We need an API gateway with some lambdas. Yeah,
all the DynamoDB table. tables. Probably we need more than one. So
well, we can start with just one. Then we can. No, well, you have the campaign and the subscription, so they are already two. You're right.
Yeah, campaign and subscription. So let's start with the campaign one. That should be a little bit easier. So campaign table, for lack of better naming. So type is AWS DynamoDB table. Properties, and this is another thing that I always have to Google because it can be fun. So table name, not table class, table name. And we do another sub. By the way, sub is like a string interpolation, if it wasn't clear. And we call this one...
this one is the campaign table. Yeah.
And
campaign.
Then here is going to complain that we need to specify the key definition, I think. Key schema, yeah, key schema is missing. Now, what do we have here as keys? Probably just the campaign ID is the key as a single.
I think the primary key is the campaign ID, nothing else.
Yeah, this we literally read key value pairs.
Yeah.
Okay, so attribute name. What did you say? Campaign ID. And then key type, this one. Come on, you can give me some autocomplete. Okay.
No. What you want to do? A UUID or just a number? I mean, do you care if somebody tries to guess do you care if somebody tries to guess your campaign's ID?
No, I think it's better to use some kind of UUID or ULID or something like that.
Okay.
Okay, I think the key type is going to be hash, if I remember correctly. And that's the only thing we need, right?
Tommaso was asking if we want to identify a campaign by this UUID code, or if we want to use a slug, so a string that identifies the campaign.
I think it's going to be mostly transparent to everyone. So I think a UUID of some sort is probably fine. Okay, what are we missing? Attribute definition. Did we need to specify that? Okay. Again, I'm Googling in the background, so you have a peek of what doing DynamoDB stuff looks like. You can never remember the exact syntax, at least I can't. Okay, yeah, we need to specify what kind of type is this. That's the problem. So this can be a string, it can be a number, can be a float or whatever. So the next thing we need to say is attribute definitions, and attribute name is again campaign ID, and S means that this is going to be a string. And that's almost everything we need. One last thing that I want to do is billing mode. And this is another massive conversation.
You don't want to get poor?
Okay, so let me answer the questions in order. So DynamoDB is a key value store. Kinda. It's a good mental model to think about it as a key value store, but you can do more than that. Like you can do query, you can do upserts, you can do multiple reads. Like if you structure your keys in a certain way, you can read even lists. So you can do like subsets of read in one go. So generally speaking, you can treat it as a key value storage, but there are ways to do a little bit more than just a key value storage. And it gets very tricky. There is an entire book.
You can have second indexes, you can create reverse indexes just to avoid to do full table scans. Because or you access by key, or in the very early phases of Dynamo, you had to do table scans to find data, and that was expensive.
And it doesn't scale, because the more your data grows, you still end up scanning everything from beginning to end.
So let's say that you can partition your data, basically, even if it's not a partition.
It is partitioned, and is partitioned in kind of, so that you can do basically keys where it's a compound key, and you have the partition key, which defines in which cluster your data goes. But then there is like another part of the key, which is called the sort key. And that one kind of defines how the data is ordered in the same cluster, but you can also use it as a way to create subsets of your data. So for instance, you can say, you can have a key where is a user is the key, the first part of the key, and the second part of the key, the sort key, is, for instance, the order ID. So you could use those two things to get all the orders for a user in just one query. Maybe it's like ClickHouse. I'm not familiar enough with ClickHouse to know if it's exactly the same or not. Okay, I'm gonna put in the chat here a link.
In our use case, we just want to access by one ID, so it's the simplest way of using Dynamo.
Exactly. So we are using it as a key value pair. But if people are curious, this book is kind of the Bible of DynamoDB, because it showcases all the patterns that, like, how do you implement tables in DynamoDB to fulfill all sorts of common patterns. And it compares even to, I don't know, if you want to do something that looks like a join in SQL, what is the closest thing you can do with DynamoDB, and how do you have to structure your data to do that? Very advanced, but if you really want to invest in DynamoDB, I would recommend this book.
So we pay by request.
And this is the other point. So by default, DynamoDB used to be very annoying because you needed to, so the billing model is based on, the traditional billing model is based on the number of read and write that you do per second. So it means that you need to upfront pre-allocate capacity. So depending what do you expect in terms of how much read and writes do you need, you'll need to pre-allocate the throughput, and you will be charged for a constant amount. You cannot go more than the throughput. If it happens, the request is going to be rejected, and your application needs to deal with that. But more recently, I think a few years ago, they introduced this more serverless mode that is called pay per request, which it is generally much cheaper if you are using your DynamoDB sporadically. You don't need to do any upfront calculation. It will scale automatically for you. Of course, if you get into very big scale, it is more expensive than just doing all the maths upfront. So for our use case, going for pay for request is probably fine, because if we are not using this application for a month, we are only paying for the data. We are not paying for requests. But if we end up having millions of users, which I don't think is going to be the case, then this model is probably going to be more expensive than pre-allocating the capacity needed for 1 million users. Cool. What else do we need? Why is it complaining here? Oh, yeah, we need to specify the deletion policy and update replace policy. And this is what it is. Why it doesn't autocomplete? Come on. What if I click there? Okay, so the deletion policy is what do you want to happen if you delete your stack? Do you also want to delete this table and lose all the data? Or do you want to delete the entire stack but keep the table so you can recover the data? So for now, we're just going to go with retain. And the other one was update replace policy. And let's just put retain as well. What else?
So if we do a sum delete of the stack, we are going to keep the table.
Exactly, yeah.
But well, why we develop, probably we could just delete it.
I think there is
the final version is
there is a snapshot thing. Maybe it's a better alternative. Let me see.
So you delete, but you take a snapshot.
So there is retain. There is retain except on create.
What it
snapshot?
means.
Okay, snapshot. I like it. So retain except on create behaves like retain for stack operation, except for the stack operation that initially created the resource. If the stack operation that created the resource is rolled back, CloudFormation deletes the resource. So it kind of protects you from...
table that...
it doesn't create an empty snapshot, basically, or it doesn't keep a table if you fail to deploy the stack for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Not happy?
Why is not happy? Cannot be snapshot for resource of type DynamoDB table. Really?
Okay, cool. So let's do retain.
I thought you could do that. Oh, resources that support snapshot are EC2 volume, Elasticache, RDS, and Redshift, not DynamoDB. So I guess we are gonna use this one. And can this one be? No, we can only use retain.
Retain, delete, or snapshot. No, snapshot, no.
Okay, scrap everything I said before. Yeah, this could be another parameter on the stack, right? We could have.
No, but well, let's go on like this for now.
So
Yeah, because when you develop, you don't want to retain. Probably when you develop, you want to delete.
Exactly. Yeah.
But fine, we can hunt down the resources later by hand and kill them.
Now the other one is the subscription
The
table.
is the subscription table. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the other thing I didn't mention is that all these other attributes, we don't need to explicitly state them. We only need to state the keys, because in every record, it's like any other NoSQL database, you can have as many keys as you want. So the structure is not necessarily consistent.
Yeah,
It's
as
on
many
you.
fields as you want.
Exactly. It's on you to enforce consistency if you want it, but you don't always want it, depending on what you're doing. Okay, so let's do the subscription table. I'm gonna copy paste because I'm lazy. So let's call it subscription table, and we need to change here subscriptions. And this time, what do we have as a key?
Change the campaign to the subscription ID. Here you could sort by campaign ID instead.
Exactly.
You could access by subscription and sort by campaign, so you can have all the subscription of a campaign at one point, or the other way around.
Good point. We can definitely do campaign ID and subscription ID. I guess the trick.
What if you want? What if you want all the subscription of a campaign from Dynamo?
Exactly. So if we switch campaign ID and subscription ID, so campaign ID is the hash key, and subscription ID is the sort key. So first part is campaign, second part is subscription. Then we can do in one query, we get all the subscriptions in a campaign.
Subscription of a campaign.
The only tricky thing is that to do the key value read, so if you only want to read one subscription, you also need the campaign ID. So the solution to that is to encode the campaign ID as part of the subscription ID.
Or to pass that also down in the message when you pass the subscription ID and email, you also have to pass the campaign ID.
Yeah, that could work as well.
Because you have it in the Lambda, because the input of the Lambda is email and campaign ID. So there is no problem forwarding it.
Yeah, fair enough. And you can keep it everywhere in the process. Right?
Yeah.
In
all the emails that you send out, your campaign and subscription.
Okay.
Or like you said, you create a subscription ID that is made of the campaign ID and his own ID.
So basically, what we need to do is add another attribute name and say subscription ID, and this is going to be the sort key. I don't remember if it's sort. Doesn't complain. Range, of course, it isn't sort. And then here we also need to specify that the attribute name of subscription ID is an attribute type S. And I think that's...
Maz is saying, he's commenting the schema, the freedom of schema, almost as you want. Once I reach the MongoDB limit, is a lot that I don't use Mongo. I don't know which limit it has.
Yeah, I don't know what's the limit. I'm curious. In DynamoDB, there is also a limit in a record. Let me see. I think it's a few kilobytes, not a lot.
400 kilobyte was.
Yeah.
In the
Something
past.
like that for
I
sure.
don't know if.
So Mongo is much better, 16 megabytes.
Oh yeah, more than 400 kilobyte. But also, it's not only 400 kilobyte. It's also that if you go above a certain size, it makes you pay 2 requests, or 3 requests, or 4 requests instead of 1 request. So you can write 400K, but then every time you write and read, you don't pay 1. You pay N now.
Yeah, I think it's
don't ask me the numbers.
1K. You have 4K. Sorry. Is it 1K? I think it's 1K, but I'm not sure.
The limit, only 1K. I was remember 400.
No, the limit is 400, but the amount you pay for, I think it's 1K.
The amount they bill you, I was remembering 4K. Every 4K they make you pay one. But I don't know, those are numbers that are by memory, so they can be wrong.
And they change them over time. Anyway,
yeah, they
if
change
people
them
are
when they want to
curious,
make more
here
money.
you should find all the information. Okay, so next step. What do we do next?
We have the two tables. We have the bucket. We need the API gateway in front of all of this.
Which is going to be created automatically by when we create a Lambda with a HTTP trigger event.
Okay, so we don't need to create it.
We don't need to explicitly create it unless we want to customize certain properties. Then there is a way to
we need that. The SQS queue.
Good point. We need the SQS queue, which we can start to create. So let's put it here. What do we call it? Confirmation email queue.
Oh, yeah, or email queue, but yes.
SQS queue. That should be enough. And we need. Oh yeah, it could be email queue because we might use it for even the other. Like even when you confirmed, you need to wait for another email that will go again in the queue, maybe with a different job structure.
Yeah, with
but
a different payload, but
Mhm.
give me one queue.
Yeah, that's up to us to decide whether it's.
Yeah, if
we
you
do
want
like
2 queue or 1 queue.
Exactly. Let's keep it simple. Let's do just one.
Yeah.
So properties, I think we have queue name. And let's do again sub. I'm not spelling this consistently. Am I?
No, you're not. You copy and pasted it.
Oh, I called it
yes,
tiny without the
on
Y.
line 20, in line 23, you have the Y. In the other ones, you have an I.
Okay, let's spell it correctly. Sounds good. So here is tiny with a Y. Then we have the app ID. Oh, I disabled Copilot. That's why I wasn't getting smart suggestions.
Tommaso is saying that I don't know why people love YAML. I prefer to use code without documentation that works correctly, and also logs plus loops are used sometimes. So Pulumi, basically. But no, yeah, I agree on that. I had at work to take the decision if defining something with code or with YAML, and I went with code because in the end, with YAML, it would have been a mess.
We could have used CDK, which is like Pulumi, but AWS version of it. Which
AWS
is
Pulumi.
Yeah, which is like what
But
Tommaso is describing. You write like a class that says email queue, new instance of SQS queue, and these are all the properties, and you get auto completion and all. I personally think that there is more complexity to it because then you have more steps before you are able to deploy. But if you're building a complex project, there might be advantages to that.
Is SAM integrating with that or not?
I don't. So it's probably the other way around. In CDK, you can use some things of SAM. You don't necessarily use it for the templating. You use it more for the local testing stuff that SAM gives you. So they will use the SAM CLI from CDK. You can do that kind of stuff.
Let's go on being YAML engineers.
Yes, for this project, it's probably fine. Okay, let's call it just email. Cool. So what else do we need to specify here? Retention period.
1 day.
Interesting.
So they make you pay for that.
Why Copilot doesn't love me anymore?
You forgot to pay the subscription fee.
Maybe.
Are you paying invisibility?
Yes. But yeah, they don't like that anymore.
This stream was sponsored by.
Copilot. No, not anymore.
Yeah, no, this stream was sponsored by nobody ever.
Okay, here as well we need to define the retention policy. And I think here it's fine to say delete, to be honest.
Yeah, get rid of the queue if we deploy a stack.
Okay. And this is something we need to Google because I don't remember.
What are the needed pieces for an SQS queue?
So the duration of a message in the queue, how long a message is going to stay in the queue before it gets deleted, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Is it message retention period? But it's not mandatory. The default retention period will delete the data after a predefined time. Set an explicit. Is this just like a linting error?
I think this is a warning. It's not an error.
I'm just curious at this point.
Try to run a SUM validate to see what it tells you.
So if we say this is in what? In days. So
What?
Let's put 4 days, right? This is 4 days copied from the docs. It's still not up.
So it's not in days, it's in what, seconds?
In seconds, yeah.
Okay.
No partition key should be specified. Strange. Yeah, SQS is actually, I really like the API of SQS because I think unlike DynamoDB and many other services, it gives you a nicer abstraction. You don't have to think too much on how they implemented the service. But yeah. But
it's just a queue. They don't care.
But it does distribute a queue. Like it's not a dummy queue. It scales a lot if you need to.
But I don't think it guarantees you the message in the same order you put them in.
Unless you do a FIFO queue, which has a little bit less throughput and other constraints, because then you also need to consume the data in order, right? You cannot distribute it.
But in our case, it's not important to have them in order.
So let's
also because there will be no load. So
let's do the first function.
First Lambda.
All right, let's try to describe all the lambdas, even though we don't write the code just yet. We might have like a dummy hello world for now.
But is this more a step function? Sorry. No, well, those are different calls in different moments.
You could force it into a step function, meaning that you can use that callback thing. Have you ever used the callback thing in step functions?
No. They don't want to start.
Yeah, you could model this with a step function, but then you still need to tell, because you have external inputs to progress the step function.
Yeah.
So you can do that with the callback. So basically you can say this step is going to stay there until somebody calls that callback. So then you are still building all these APIs. It's just maybe for visualizing it could be convenient. But...
Yeah, but it's possible to do this as a step function in theory.
Some of it, I don't like. It's not going to expose different APIs at different steps. It's more for you to track the state. You still need to build APIs.
No, but okay.
I think.
Let's go on with the first. You want to lay down all of them and just empty?
Yeah, just to have the lambdas as well. So SQS is not like Kafka, for instance, which guarantees the order inside a partition. It is strange to me because if it scales, how it scales with a partition strategy. So they do have a partition strategy, it's just you don't get to see it. And also there are less guarantees compared to Kafka because you don't have any ordering enforced by default in SQS, unless you use the FIFO queue where you can enforce ordering. And I think you also can have a concept similar to topics in the FIFO queues. But I think SQS is not similar to Kafka. I would say the Kinesis is more the equivalent of Kafka or a similar service to Kafka. So it's more you need to process jobs, while Kafka is more like a log data structure, distributed log data structure that you can process, like write forward logs, whatever you want to call it. Do you agree, Roberto, or it's just me?
But no, yes, you can force Kafka to be a database if you want, with a little bit of push.
Madness.
No, you can keep all the events forever, and then you just have your materialized state of the application, and you rewind the cursor in a topic if you need.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
you
SQS is
replay,
not
you
that.
reaggregate. No, in SQS you do nothing of that.
They actually try to
message
delete.
out.
Exactly. They actually try to delete the messages as fast as possible. I think the limit is 1 week. If you even wanted to keep it as long as possible, I think it's like 1 week. You cannot keep it longer than that. Okay, so the first Lambda we say that is the form, we call it.
Yeah, it's the form one. Let's call it form.
So let's call it form rendering function. And let's delete all this crap. So it's a Lambda that we build with Rust. We might put the code somewhere else. I don't like the structure.
How do we
now,
structure the code? We have multiple folder in the root, or a folder with all the multiple lambdas in it?
I think we'll do like a cargo workspace, and then we can put different lambdas in different cargo projects. That's how I've done it in the past.
Fine. So hello world in line 95 is not the event that we want. The event that we want here is a form request.
Yeah, this can be anything
HTTP.
really.
Form request of type.
It is of type
HTTP.
get, and we can say form and then campaign ID, something like that.
Type is not API at this point, or is API?
API.
Is API, okay.
This is another conversation. Do you know that there are two versions of API Gateway?
Yes. So which one is the API one here?
I think it's the newer one. If you put
okay.
Actually, no, I'm having second thoughts. I think HTTP API might be the newer one. Let's check that.
Thank you, AWS, for having multiple ways.
Yeah, this is one of the things I hate in AWS, to be honest.
Tommaso is rightfully asking, how do you handle email duplication? So how do you know if somebody already subscribed with that email?
We could do a check.
And do you care?
I wouldn't care, to be honest, because you don't have a guarantee that they ever received the email. So it is likely that if they try again, it's because either they lost the email or they never receive it. So if you try to be smart and say, don't duplicate.
No, you already got it.
Yeah. I mean, you might not duplicate the record, but you should still send the email, I think. You shouldn't make assumptions on...
You can duplicate the record in Dynamo because, like we said, then you are moving them away and consolidate them from the DynamoDB table with the subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was to have a TTL of like 1 week. If you don't confirm your email in 1 week, you go out of the table automatically. And if you confirm your email with writing the email confirmed table, that email is confirmed, at that point, the third table can have the email as key. And at that point, you access by key the email and you know that it's there. Because for the newsletter, you care about the key, the email only.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't care about anything else.
Okay.
So, what is the difference between API and HTTP API? Which one is the new fancy stuff that we need to use?
Let's see, API types. So HTTP API is a lightweight, low latency RESTful API. REST API is a customizable, feature-rich RESTful API. But the names don't match here, because here you don't have to say HTTP or REST. It's either HTTP API or API. So I'm going to assume that HTTP API.
Thank you, AWS documentation. You're always so useful. I mean, we can go with the simple version. I don't think we need any fancy stuff or...
Yes, let's go with this one for now. I think, though, HTTP API is a little bit cheaper, but yeah, you have less features. Anyway, for now, let's just list all the functions. So what this one needs to do. This one we said needs to access the...
It needs to access the DynamoDB table with the campaigns to get back what the campaign, what is in the campaign ID table that it needs. Does it need? You need to verify if the campaign exists. Point one.
Okay, so let's do environment variables. So we need to have the campaigns table, and it's a reference to the campaigns table that we called campaigns table.
Now there is also 48 subscriptions table.
Is it?
Then 48,
Good
line
catch,
48.
yes.
Or we keep plural or we keep singular. I have no opinion on that. But only opinion is that it must be the same inside the file.
It needs the email queue. What else does it need?
Does it need the email queue, the one that is in the front? No.
Oh no, yeah, this
have
one.
to chat with the queue. This
Good
one is the
point.
front end. It needs to be able to send the HTTP request. No, not even, because it's the browser sending the next HTTP request.
Yeah, probably we don't even care about the campaigns table.
No, it needs to validate if the campaign exists or not.
If we want.
Or you don't care. Even
Let's
there.
keep it. We might not care. We might just say...
show me again the campaign table. Sorry for a second.
From here?
From your schema, from your drawing. Name, reward. If you want to show the name of the campaign in the form, you need the campaign. You need access to the table.
Good point. Maybe also in the future you might have some customization here. Like if this was a
some custom message, custom message in the top of the form. So you need to have access to the campaign table to be able to read by campaign ID the name, to show the name on top of the form, for example.
Fair enough.
What do you think? Makes sense?
Okay, let's keep it for now. So then what else does it need? Nothing else.
No, nothing else.
Cool. So this is the first Lambda. Then the second Lambda is, I'm just going to copy paste the code and then we will change it. So the second Lambda is subscribe Lambda. So subscribe function is going to point to the same code. For now, doesn't matter. And what is the endpoint? Here we said, we didn't even mention an endpoint.
We didn't wrote the endpoints, so we just laid out.
But it could be a post.
Yeah, it should be a post
to the same thing.
Yes, why not?
And it doesn't have to be implemented as the same Lambda. It's just the way.
This one has to have access to the campaign table, the subscription table, because it's here that we write the subscriptions
table.
And this time the queue for real.
And this time email queue. Now we also need to give it policies actually. And here we have the DynamoDB read policy. By the way, this is one of the amazing shortcuts. This is going to generate the policy for us. With CloudFormation, you need to write the entire policy.
Yeah, it's way less this time.
And the other policies here. Now, this one is going to have 3 different policies. It's going to have the DynamoDB CRUD write policy, I guess, or CRUD.
This one should write. But how do you specify to which table, which policy? I mean,
here it's like a template. So you
okay, cool. There, right? Sorry, I missed it.
Sorry, I was going a bit fast.
This one should read the campaign and write the subscription.
So read policy on the ref campaigns table.
And should be read and write.
Write or CRUD if it's read and write on the ref subscriptions.
Why it should read the subscription? Let me think.
Yeah, does it? Or it can be just a write?
No, probably just write. I mean, we can always change it later.
Okay, and then it needs to be able to do SQS send message policy on the ref email queue.
Cool.
That should be enough. Okay.
Yes.
Then another Lambda, which is the confirm.
Third one, that is the one that gets the stuff from the SQS queue.
Oh
so
yeah, send
it's,
confirmation.
so it's not an API type this time, but it's something that is answering to the SQS queue.
Yes. So now the event, actually here we call it form request.
Form request. Yeah, this is, it's still the form request.
Let's call it form render here,
Render,
form
yeah.
request. And here
and
is
this one,
job,
email queue
job.
processing. Email job.
So type, this time is SQS. Why it doesn't autocomplete? Come on, you should know that. Okay,
No,
let me Google.
it doesn't.
Yeah, definitely with CDK it would have been easier because it does autocomplete. Okay, so it's type SQS. So that was correct. We guessed it. Oh, look at that. If we overlay, it tells us Alexa Skill API CloudWatch. Cool. Now, what are the properties? The queue name, and we can say ref, what did we call it? Email queue, and batch size. We can specify how many messages we want to process at a time. So, I don't know, 10.
For the load that you will have, you can get 10.
I think the maximum
And
is
these,
20 anyway. It's not like huge.
oh, okay, then it's not a big problem.
Or maybe
It's not
100.
1,000.
Let's see if they tell us
Still
something.
small.
Oh, no, it can be much bigger.
10,000.
But the default
okay,
is 10.
10,000. So you are just specifying the default. So this one should do what? Read the subscription, read the campaign. No, that should not read the campaign, this one.
This one might
should only read the description.
We said that we might have a template in S3, but for now we're just going to have a standard template.
Okay. And the template is in the campaign, correct. Should write to the subscription, this one, and read. So it's CRUD. Because from your schema, you have a field called the sent at, something like that. And you have to update the sent at.
So this one is already there.
It's CRUD. Yeah.
Do we need to read?
Have to put it. No, but you have to make it CRUD, not write in line 145.
Because it also needs to read.
I think so.
Was it CRUD? Was that correct?
Does it need to write? Yes. Does it need to read? If you have to update a field, yes, you have to read before writing.
Doesn't need this one.
It needs to be able to read the SQS queue. No, because it's coming in as an event, so it doesn't need to have the policy strictly. The policy will be created by the fact that it's connected to the SQS queue.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Do we want to... Because there are also the other lambdas for the pixel and for the confirmation, but this is enough to get the first email, right?
Yes, I think so. I was thinking one last thing that maybe we should put an explicit timeout of, I don't know, this one might probably be even 2 minutes. Should be more than enough to send
because
10 emails.
If it is sending 10 emails in a run, it can take a while.
While this one probably should be much faster. I think there is a default here. Yeah, 3 seconds is probably fine. And I think here we can go for 256. Okay. Why is it complaining here? Event source ARN, can ref, resource of types. What? Where did you see event source ARN?
I don't see.
Resources, send confirmation function, email queue processing properties. Send confirmation function, email queue processing. There. The ref. Okay,
It's
cool.
not happy about the ref.
Yes, another annoying thing of CloudFormation.
Because you have to get the ARN and not the MAQ is an object.
Yeah, so ref is a little bit magic, meaning that it's a reference. And sometimes they decided that reference is just the name. Sometimes it's the full ARN. So sometimes using the ref is not doing exactly what you want to do in the specific context. And this is one of those cases where, because ref just gives you the queue name, and here they want explicitly the ARN, we need to explicitly read that attribute.
Okay, now we are at a certain time. We have also to do the outputs.
Which should be only this. API, let's call it API prefix. That should be it. Why is it complaining? Okay, it's not complaining anymore. So should we try to deploy and see what happens?
Yeah, I just wanted to see deployed empty, and then we can go on from here next time.
App ID not used. How is not used if we use it here? Oh, it's $1? Is it? Yes, okay, so I need to change it everywhere.
Yes.
So the linter is useful sometimes. Okay, sounds good. So we can do some validate, lint.
First of all, let's validate it. So it
Some
can throw
build.
1000 errors.
This is going to take a while because it needs to compile. Yes, we want beta features. Hopefully it's going to compile the function once.
Yeah, at least you're not breaking up while you compile. Not like my machine. You saw that technique on the internet, yeah.
Now I'm not going to answer any question because I'm breaking up. Okay, so now some deploy guided. So the first time we deploy, we want it to be guided. So let's call it Tinykit with the correct spelling. I don't know where did I...
taking the one
yeah.
Who's taking the one with the I?
Okay, Ireland is fine. App ID, we call it Tinykit dev, I guess. Yes. Confirm changes, yes. I want to see the preview. Allow it to create roles, yes. Disable rollback, no. There is no authentication in the APIs. Is that okay? Yes. Because these are public APIs. Cyberscape function has no authentication. Yes, as well. Save arguments to configuration file. Yes. And the name of the configuration file, environment default. Okay, let's see.
Some configuration environment, what is?
I think you can manage multiple environments with the same stack. And then you could create, for instance, different parameters, one for dev, one for prod, one for something else.
Okay.
Or override
so it's
specific.
creating.
But honestly, I never use it that way, yeah.
Okay. DynamoDB table, SQS, Lambda permissions, YAM roles, Lambda function, S3 bucket, event source for the same confirmation, mapping.
Yeah, this is basically
another role.
This is basically the thing that polls from the queue and invokes your own function. So that's why we didn't have to give permission to poll from the queue, because there is a thing there that is doing all of that magic. Then
server role. The API gateway is there, so we didn't have to create it. It's created on its own. Stage GE. So it's using REST API. So
which is the old
API
one.
is the REST API.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it maps. Okay, let's see what it. Yes.
So while it deploys, I remember that there is a way here to. Is it here? No. There is a way to do application composer. Open template with application composer. Why I didn't like it? Okay.
You can draw a scheme of it. Okay.
So it should already show us a little bit of the structure. So we have an API. This API has 2 lambdas connected for now. Then there is a bucket,
That nobody cares about.
which seems wrong at the moment.
Is not connected to the Lambda that is taken from the queue, the bucket.
Oh, no, because we will
That's the
only
thing.
need it in the confirmation email, the one that generates the pre-signed URL, right? Which we haven't done yet.
But there's not the template of the email in the bucket.
But we said that for now we ignore that because
Okay.
we
For
can
now
just
we
start
don't
coding.
care. Okay.
Okay, then we have SQS, which we didn't create a DLQ. Not good. So if we fail to send stuff,
We don't care. If we fail,
it's
we
just
fail
lost.
hard.
But then there is a send confirmation function, and this one is connected to the DynamoDB.
Can you move the tables somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah, like below. So
Or
it's getting
in a place where
it's getting messy.
Yeah, does it outer range? No, arrange it's in a
The
bad
range
way.
is not.
Okay, anyway,
smart.
did it fail? It failed. Why? Invite request provided. Queue visibility timeout, 30 seconds is less than function timeout. Ooh, that's an interesting error. I didn't expect it to handle this kind of stuff. So it's basically saying queue visibility timeout.
So queue visibility is that if you don't give an acknowledge of the message in 30 seconds, you consider the message failed and is put back in the queue.
I think so. So we need to increase that. It's a
So
good suggestion.
It should be at least as long as the Lambda, because the Lambda is giving okay at the end of it.
Exactly. So let's go to the queue visibility, which is, why did you
Because
it did format my template with this thing. But whatever. Okay. The cool thing here though is that we can go on the queue, I think, and details, and no, it doesn't have
there
the
is
queue
no visibility.
I'm so disappointed. I was expecting here to see all the properties, but no. Okay,
Nice. What
whatever.
plugin is this one?
It's the AWS one.
Okay. They did something decent? What?
They existed in the web UI for a while, and now they also made it available in the VS Code plugin. So Q is it QVC? How do you spell that? Visibility timeout. So this needs to be 120, right? Is it in seconds?
But well, make it a little bit more than 100. I hope it's in seconds of 120. I mean,
let's make it 200.
Yeah, just.
Or let's make it double, 200 and.
No, 200 is fine. Yeah, but nobody's going to die if they wait email for 2 minutes.
Okay, some deploy. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can get something deployed.
You have to build again before deploying.
Oh, you're right.
Because you changed the template, so you have to some build again.
Yes.
Last time I got bitten by that, I'm not forgetting.
Good catch. Now it's doing the rollback thingy. So we need to go into CloudFormation. Rollback complete. So what do you want? What is your problem? Fail to create.
So change. we have to destroy and then deploy.
Oh, it might be because we have those resources that. Let's see what happens when we delete. Delete skipped. Look at that. So we have to manually delete them.
The DynamoDB tables. Yeah. I mean, while we are in development, we could just say instead of keep delete, probably.
I think so. Maybe make it a parameter at some point later.
Yeah, that based on the environment is delete or keep or retain. Sorry, not keep.
Okay. So can we redeploy? Okay. Yes.
We have a change set. Is this creating something in CloudFormation in your account or not?
You mean if the stack is visible in CloudFormation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which is here. So we
Oh,
can
yeah,
see
but it's
exactly.
not graphic. It's just okay. We got it.
I think there might be a way to open a stack from, like, you go here, Composer, I think it's called. Application Composer is exactly the same thing we saw there in the.
Can you open something that you have already?
Good question. If we can open a stack without needing the template. The first time I tried this, it wasn't a feature, but maybe now it is. Template file. No, this is going to open from my machine.
Okay. No, it doesn't seem to be able to read the CloudFormation stacks.
Which is a bit annoying because they could have done it. Would have been a nice feature.
Yeah, but never mind. That's gone.
Okay, what's going on with our deployment? Creation complete. Amazing. So this is now working. We have an endpoint there. Don't call it. But
also because what is giving you back hello world?
I don't even know if it works because I don't know if that API is a RESTful one. What is it?
200 hello world.
Oh yeah, it is an hash. So let's try.
If you call it in get, if you call it in get /form/a number / something, it should give you. Also because you are destroying this after the stream,
so form / 20
something.
Hello world. So that works.
So it's working,
which is great. And what else do we want to see here? We want to see that if we go to Lambda,
we should see the logs.
We should have a couple of lambdas, actually 3 lambdas. The send confirmation, the form rendering, and the subscribe. So the 3 that we created. They all do the same thing because it's the same code at this point.
Yeah, that's okay.
Then if we go to DynamoDB, we should see 2 tables. Campaigns, and subscriptions. That's great. And then if we go to SQS, we should see that we have 1 queue. There we go. And also if we go to S3, we should have a bucket. Now, the first one is from Sam for deployment, so don't worry, but this is our bucket. Awesome.
Nice. So let's wrap it up here for today.
Oh yeah, one last thing. We didn't explicitly create Event Bridge because Event Bridge has a default bus that you can use to do everything. So you just call the API and it works. But we will need, if we want to send messages to Event Bridge, we will need to give our lambdas the permission to use the default bus.
Okay. So no need to create, but need for policies.
Exactly. You can also create your own custom bus, but it's just easier to use the default one, I think.
You can find the recording on YouTube. The link is on Twitch in the About section. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do live streaming on Twitch every Monday, 6 p.m. Dublin time. Make sure to check the Twitch link in the YouTube description and give us a follow so that you can be notified. Feel free to leave comments. And Luciano, are we going to put this in some GitHub repository?
Yes, I will make it available and link it. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find the link in the show notes.
Okay, so if you go to the link, GitHub link, feel free to open pull requests, leave us comments. We are trying to learn Rust, so our solution will not be cleanest. Even if today we didn't wrote a lot of Rust, more YAML, but it happens. And if you know better ways of doing stuff, please let us know. Thank you for the collaboration in the chat. And are we going to rate somebody now?
We are. So thank you. And see you.
Thank you. Bye. And see you next time.